Hi, fifth graders. We are going to be reading from My Side of the Mountain today. We'll read pages 41 through 54. And yesterday, I know that my camera flipped around. I'm not really sure what happened there, but let me show you the pictures from yesterday, and then we'll get started. So this was one of the pictures that showed Sam's tree, or the forest of trees that he was in when he was finding his large hickory tree. And then this one shows the how he boiled the eggs in the leaves, and his writing says, "Good working fireplace with leaf bracket." And then this one shows the traps that he made, the snares. So he shows the one on the top that says "good snare." It says, "This device is not along and is set along an animal's runway." And then the one on the bottom shows the bait and says, "This one will work sometimes too." And those were all the pictures from yesterday. Sorry about that. So we're going to get started, and this first chapter is called "The King's Provider." Miss Turner was glad to see me. I told her I wanted some books on hawks and falcons, and she located a few, although there was not much to be had on the subject. We worked all afternoon, and I learned enough. I departed when the library closed. Miss Turner whispered to me as I left, "Sam, you need a haircut." I hadn't seen myself in so long that this had not occurred to me. "Gee, I don't have any scissors." She thought for a minute, got out her library scissors, and sat me down on the back steps. She did a fine job, and I looked like any other boy who had played hard all day, and who, with a little soap and water after supper, would be going off to bed in a regular house. I didn't get back to my tree that night. The May apples were ripe, and I stuffed on those until I went through the woods. They taste like a very sweet banana. They're earthy and a little slippery, but I liked them. At the stream, I caught a trout. Everyone thinks a trout is hard to catch because of all the fancy gear and flies and lines sold for trout fishing. But honestly, they are easier to catch than any other fish. They have big mouths and snatch and swallow whole anything they see when they are hungry. With my wooden hook in its mouth, the trout was mine. The trouble is that trout are not hungry when most people have time to fish. I knew they were hungry that evening because the creek was swirling and minnows and everything else were jumping out of the water. When you see that, go fish. You'll get them. I made a fire on a flat boulder in the stream and cooked the trout. I did this so I could watch the sky. I wanted to see the falcon again. I also put the trout head on a hook and dropped it in the pool. A snapping turtle would view a trout head with relish. That means that a snapping turtle would view it like really excitedly and hungrily with relish. I waited for the falcon patiently. I didn't have to go anywhere. After an hour or so, I was rewarded. A slender speck came from the valley and glided above the stream. It was still very far away when it folded its wings and bombed the earth. I watched. It arose clumsy and big, carrying food, and winged back to the valley. I sprinted down the stream and made myself a lean-to near some cliffs where I thought the bird had disappeared. That means he made himself a little shelter. Having learned that day that duckhawks prefer to nest on cliffs, I settled for this site. So now he's in the stream ecosystem, and now we know that the falcon likes to nest on cliffs. So there's cliffs by that stream, and that's where the falcon, the peregrine falcon, is. Early the next morning, I got up and dug the tubers of the arrow leaf that grew along the stream bank. I baked these and boiled mussels for breakfast. Then I curled up behind a willow and watched the cliff. The falcons came in behind me and circled the stream. They had apparently been out hunting before I had gotten up, as they were returning with food. This was exciting news. They were feeding young, and I was somewhere near the nest. I watched one of them swing on the cliff and disappear. A few minutes later, it winged out empty-footed. I marked the spot mentally and said, "Ha!" After splashing across the stream in the shallows, I stood at the bottom of the cliff and wondered how on earth I was going to climb the sheer wall. I wanted a falcon so badly, however, that I dug in with my toes and hands and started up. The first part was easy. It was not too steep. When I thought I was stuck, I found a little ledge and shinnied up to it. I was high, and when I looked down, the stream spun. I decided not to look down anymore. I edged up to another ledge and lay down on it and catch my breath. I was shaking from exertion, and I was tired. I looked up to see how much higher I had to go when my hand touched something moist. I pulled it back and saw that it was white, bird droppings. So he found some bird poo on the cliff, so he knows he must be getting close. Then I saw them. Almost where my hand had been sat 3 fuzzy, whitish-gray birds. Their wide-open mouths gave them a startled look. "Oh, hello, hello," I said. "You are cute." When I spoke, all 3 blinked at once. All 3 heads turned and followed my hand as I swung it up toward them. All 3 watched my hand with open mouths. They were marvelous. I chuckled, but I couldn't reach them. I warmed forward and wham! Something hit my shoulder. It pained. I turned my head to see the bird female. She had hit me. She winged out, banked, and started back for another strike. Now I was scared, for I was sure she would cut me wide open. With sudden nerve, I stood up, stepped forward, and picked up the biggest of the nestlings. The females are bigger than the males. They are the falcons. They are the pride of kings. I tucked her in my sweater and leaned against the cliff, facing the bullet-like dive of the falcon. I threw out my foot as she struck, and the sole of my tennis shoe took the blow. So here's where Sam is, and there's the nestlings, or the baby falcons. So this is something where I'm already thinking like, oh, he's really having a human impact on the ecosystem because he's taking a baby falcon. So let's see what happens. The female was now gathering speed for another attack, and when I say speed, I mean 50 to 60 miles an hour. I could see myself battered and torn, lying in the valley below, and I said to myself, "Sam Gribley, you had better get down from here like a rabbit." I jumped to the ledge below, found it was really quite wide, slid on the seat of my pants to the next ledge, and stopped. The hawk apparently couldn't count. She did not know I had a youngster, for she checked her nest, saw the open mouths, and then she forgot about me. I scrambled down to the riverbed somehow, being very careful not to hurt the hot, fuzzy body that was against my own. However, Frightful, as I called her right then and there because of the difficulties we had in getting together, did not think so gently of me. She dug her talons in my skin to brace herself during the bumpy ride to the ground. I stumbled to the stream, placed her in a nest of buttercups are flowers, and dropped beside her. I fell asleep. When I awoke, my eyes opened to 2 gray eyes in a white Strubly head. Small pin feathers were sticking out of the Strubly down, like feathers in an Indian quiver. The big blue beak curled down in a snarl and up in a smile. "Oh, Frightful," I said, "you are a raving beauty." Frightful fluffed her nubby feathers and shook. I picked her up in the cup of my hands and held her under my chin. I stuck my nose in the deep, warm fuzz. It smelled dusty and sweet. I liked that bird. Oh, how I liked that bird from the smelly minute. It was so pleasant to feel the beating life and see the funny little awkward moments of a young thing. The legs pushed out between my fingers. I gathered them up together with thrashing wings and tucked the bird in one piece under my chin. I rocked. Frightful, I said, you will enjoy what we are going to do. I washed my bleeding shoulder in the creek, tucked the torn threads of my sweater back into the hole they had come out of, and set out for my tree. So this is how he gets Frightful, who he trains to be his falcon. And we found out about that at the very beginning of the book. This is the next chapter, a brief account of what I did about the first man who was after me. At the edge of the meadow, I sensed all was not well at camp. How I knew there was a human being there was not clear to me then. I can only say that after living so long with the birds and animals, the movement of a human is like the difference between the explosion of a cap pistol and a cannon. I wormed toward camp. When I could see the man I felt to be there, I stopped and looked. He was wearing a forester's uniform. Immediately, I thought they had sent someone to bring me in, and I began to shake. Then I realized that I didn't have to go back to meet the man at all. I was perfectly free and capable of settling down anywhere. My tree was just a pleasant habit. I circled the meadow and went over to the gorge. On the way, I checked the trap. It was a deadfall, a figure 4 under a big rock. The rock was down. The food was rabbit. So his first trap caught a rabbit. I picked a comfortable place just below the rim of the gorge where I could pop up every now and then and watch my tree. Here I dressed down the rabbit and fed Frightful some of the more savory bites from a young falcon's point of view, the liver, the heart, the brain. She ate in gulps. As I watched her swallow, I sensed a great pleasure. It was hard to explain my feelings at that moment. It seemed marvelous to see life pump through that strange little body of feathers, wordless noises, milk eyes, much as life pumped through me. The food put the bird to sleep. I watched her eyelids close from the bottom up and her head quiver. The fuzzy body rocked, the tail spread to steady it, and the little duck hawk almost sighed as she sank into the leaves, sleeping. I had lots of time. I was going to wait for the man to leave, so I stared at my bird, the beautiful details of the new feathers, the fern-like lashes along the lids, the saucy bristles at the base of the beak. Pleasant hours passed. Frightful would awaken then. I would feed her, she would fall back asleep, and I would watch the breath rock her body ever so slightly. I was breathing the same way, only not as fast. Her heart beat much faster than mine. She was designed on her bones for a swifter life. It finally occurred to me that I was very hungry. I stood up to see if the man was gone. He was yawning and pacing. The sun was slanting on him now, and I could see him quite well. He was a fire warden. Of course, it had not rained, I told myself, for almost 3 weeks, and the fire planes have been circling the mountains and valleys, patrolling the mountains. Apparently, the smoke from my fire was spotted, and a man was sent to check it. I recalled the bare, trampled ground around the tree, the fireplace of rocks filled with ashes, the wood chips from the making of my bed, and resolved hereafter to keep my yard clean. So what he means by that is he didn't clean up outside of the tree, and so when the fire warden came to see if there was a fire there and what was going on with the forest, he saw the evidence of a human being there, and that's why he's waiting, because he wants to see what's going on, and he doesn't want someone making a fire in the forest because it's a really dry season, and if a fire gets out of control, it would start a huge forest fire. So now Sam's thinking, I need to clean up my whole space anytime I leave so that no one can tell that that's where I'm living. So I made rabbit soup in a tin can I found at the bottom of the gorge. I seasoned it with wild garlic and jack-in-the-pulpit roots. Ooh, that's a new plant. I don't know what jack-in-the-pulpit roots are. Jack in the pulpits, oh, here, we're going to find out. Jack in the pulpits have 3 big leaves on a stalk and are easily recognized by the curly striped awning above a stiff, serious preacher named Jack. The Jack in the pulpit root or corm tastes like a potato. It should never be eaten raw. The fire I made was only of the driest wood, and I made it right at the water's edge. I didn't want a smoky fire on this particular evening. After supper, I made a bow bed and stretched out with Frightful beside me. Apparently, the more you stroke and handle a falcon, the easier they are to train. I had all sorts of plans for hoods and jessies. Jessies are the things that attach their talons to you, and hoods are what cover their face so that when you so that you can keep them still. And I soon forgot about the man. Stretched on the boughs, I listened to the wood calling their haunting good nights until I fell asleep. So this next chapter is called In Which I Learned to Season My Food. So here, we have all of the animals and all of the plants that in Sam's story that we've heard about or learned a little bit about, and we have a few more to add from today. But now he's starting to figure out how to use these plants because he's eating some animals and some plants, and then he's figuring out how to season his food with some plants. The fire warden made a fire sometime in the colder hours of the night. At dawn, he was asleep beside white smoldering ashes. I crawled back to the gorge, fed Frightful rabbit bites, and slipped back to the edge of the meadow to check a box trap I had set the day before. I made it by tying small sticks together like a log cabin. This trap was better than snares or deadfalls. It had caught numerous rabbits, several squirrels, and a groundhog. So there's a groundhog there too. We'll have to add that one. I saw as I inched toward it that it was closed. The sight of a closed trap excites me to this day. I still can't believe that animals don't understand why delicious food is in such a ridiculous spot. Well, this morning I pulled the trap deep into the woods to open it. The trapped animal was light. I couldn't guess what it was. It was also active, flipping and darting from one corner to the next. I peeked in to locate it so that I could grab it quickly behind the head without getting bitten. I was not always successful at this and had scars to prove it. I put my eye to the crack. A rumpus arose in the darkness. 2 bright eyes shone, and out through that hole that was no wider than a string bean came a weasel. He flew right out at me, landed on my shoulder, gave me a lecture that I should never forget. That means he made a whole bunch of noises at him, and vanished under the scant cover of trillium and bloodroot leaves. So those are more plants. He popped up about 5 feet away and stood on his hind feet to lecture me again. I said, "Scat!" So he darted right to my knee, put his broad furry paws on my pants, and looked me in the face. I shall never forget the fear and wonder that I felt at the bravery of that weasel. He stood his ground and berated me. I could see by the flashing of his eyes and the curl of his lip that he was furious at me for trapping him. He couldn't talk, but I knew what he meant. Wonder filled me as I realized he was absolutely unafraid. No other animal, and I knew quite a few by now, had been so brave in my presence. Screaming, he jumped on me. This surprised and scared me. I leapt from my lap to my head. He leapt from my lap to my head, took a mouthful of hair and wrestled it. My goosebumps rose. I was too frightened to move. A good thing, too, because I guess he figured that I was not going to fight back, and his scream of anger changed to a purr of peace. Still, I couldn't move. Presently, he climbed down, as stately as royalty, and off he marched, never looking back. He sank beneath the leaves like a fish beneath the water. Not a stem rippled to mark his way. And so, the Baron, that's what he names him, and I met for the first time, and it was the beginning of a harassing but wonderful friendship. Frightful had been watching all of this. She was tense with fright. Although young and inexperienced, she knew an enemy when she saw one. I picked her up and whispered into her birdie-smelling neck feathers. You wild ones know. Since I couldn't go home, I decided to spend the day in the marsh down the west side of the mountain. There were a lot of cattails and frogs there. Frightful balanced on my fist as we walked. She had learned that in the short span of one afternoon and a night. She was a very bright bird. On our way, we scared up a deer. It was a doe. I watched her dart gracefully away and said to Frightful, "That's what I want. I need a door for my house, tethers for you, and a blanket for me. How am I going to get a deer?" This was not the first time I had said this. The forest was full of deer, and I already had drawn plans on a piece of birch bark for deadfalls, pit traps, and snares. None seemed workable. The day passed. In the early evening, we stole home tree by tree to find the warden had gone. I cleaned up my front yard, scattered needles over the bare spots, and started a small fire with very dry wood that would not smoke much. No more wardens for me. I liked my tree, and although I could live somewhere else, I certainly did not want to. Once home, I immediately started to work again. I had a device I wanted to try, and put some hickory sticks in a tin can and set it to boil while I fixed dinner. Before going to bed, I noted this on a piece of birch bark. This night I am making salt. I know that people in the early days got along without it, but I think that some of these wild foods would taste better with some flavoring. I understand that hickory sticks, boiled dry, leave a salty residue. I am trying it. In the morning, I added, "It is quite true. The can is dry and thick with a black substance. It is very salty, and I tried it on frog legs for breakfast. It was just what I have needed." And so I went into salt production for several days and chipped out a niche inside the tree in which to store it. June 19th. I finished my bed today. The ash slats work very well and are quite springy and comfortable. The bed just fits in the right hand side of the tree. I have hemlock boughs on it now, but hope to have deer hides soon. I am making a figure-4 trap as tall as me with a log on it that I can barely lift. It doesn't look workable. I just wish there was another way of getting a deer. June 20th. I decided today to dig a pit to trap a deer, so I am whittling a shovel out of a board I found in the stream this morning. The stream is very useful. It has given me tin cans for pots and now an oaken board for a shovel. Frightful will hop from stump to my fist. She still can't fly. Her wing feathers are only about an inch long. I think she likes me. So here's his bed. So he built that with slats, like thin wooden slats from the ash tree. And then I think I forgot to show you guys. There is Sam with Frightful, and that is the little lean-to that he built, that he was hiding out in from the warden. And so the only other picture I wanted to show you was this picture. And this picture is actually Sam's map that he starts to draw of the mountain. So we're going to start talking about some of the places on the mountain. So he's got the gorge listed. He has his beech tree listed. I think I said hickory tree earlier. It was a beech tree. And he has some other things listed in some places where he's getting things like cattail supply. But we've read about several places in the book that he's going to. So there's a stream, marsh. He's in the forest. That's where his beech tree is. There's a creek. There's a meadow. There's the gorge and the ravine. So these are all places that he's in. And then we're going to add some other animals and plants to our list too, as we kind of build an understanding of what is around him and where he's living. So that's it for today. I want you to go to Schoology, and there'll be a discussion question on Schoology. for you to be answering, and I hope you're enjoying the book so far. We'll read 2 more chapters tomorrow. Bye.